A wild horse doomed to slaughter, an innocent baby playing. Unprotected, a hungry eagle ready to attack. 3 lives that should never cross paths are about to collide in a moment that will change everything. The rising sun tinged the green hills of the Vista Alegre farm with gold, illuminating the freshly painted stables and the white fences that stretched to the horizon. The dew still covered the grass when the first workers began their daily routine, carrying bales of hay and buckets of water for the animals that were the pride of the property. Carlos Mendonça, a middle-aged man with deep wrinkles carved by years of work under the sun of the Cerrado, walked between the stables with firm steps, his leather hat shaded attentive eyes that did not miss a single detail. The Vista Alegre farm was his legacy, built over 3 generations of his family, known throughout the region for the best purebred horses. Zika called Carlos, adjusting his belt as he approached the foreman, who supervised the feeding of the animals. Let's do a complete inspection today. I need to review our inventory before arrival of buyers from the south. Zika, a thin man, but with arms as strong as IP trunks, nodded respectfully. He had worked for the Mendonça family for over 20 years and knew every inch of that land as you wish, boss. The animals are all in excellent shape except for that problem, Carlos completed, frowning. Where is he now? In the back paddock, as you ordered. No one can get close to him without risk. The 2 men walked in silence to the most remote part of the property, where an isolated pen housed a single animal, different from the other horses on the farm, that displayed well-groomed coats and majestic postures. This one remained away with its dull black fur and a defensive posture. Upon noticing the men approaching, the animal reared up, slightly neighing in defiance. Thunder, muttered Carlos with a mixture of frustration and disappointment in his voice. 3 years trying to tame him, and nothing. He will never be good for competition or breeding with that temperament. Zika observed the animal with cautious respect. This horse has something different, boss. The Mustangs are known for being difficult, but this one seems to understand everything around him. There are days when I swear he's planning something. Carlos let out a dry laugh. What he's planning is how to take down the next trainer. We've already lost enough money with this animal. Next week the slaughterhouse truck will come and get him. The words hung in the air like a final sentence. Thunder, as if he could perfectly understand the meaning of that conversation. He fixed his dark eyes on Carlos without fear, without submission. Those eyes, Zika commented, feeling a shiver run down his spine. They are wild eyes, as if he had never forgotten the mountains where he came from. What's the point of all this savagery? On a modern farm we need animals that work with us, not against us. He's already injured 3 men and scared away all the mares we tried to get close to for breeding during the day. The other horses were taken to training, showing their grace and power on the impeccable tracks of Vista Alegre. Visitors admired the valuable animals, while Thunder remained forgotten in his isolation. When a group of foals was led to a pen near Thunder's for exercise, everyone instinctively moved away from the side of the fence that separated him from the black Mustang. The trainer installed the whip in the air. Stay away from him, that one has the devil in him. It's not for nothing they call him unpredictable. Thunder, like a storm. The afternoon wore on and the farm's activities slowed down with the setting of the sun. The lights were turned on in the workers' houses and in the main headquarters, where Carlos reviewed the accounting books with his accountant. This horse is costing us more than it's worth, Augusto. The slaughterhouse offered a low price, but it's better than continuing to waste feed and Space on a useless animal in the sky. Above the property a magnificent predator cut through the air with its imposing wings. The gray eagle with a wingspan of over 2 m soared in wide circles, its golden eyes scanning the terrain below with unmatched precision. Every movement was calculated, every air current used to conserve energy that was running out after 3 days without a successful hunt. The sun illuminated its dark brown feathers as it descended a few meters, capturing every movement on the ground. Its body was beginning to show signs of weakness. The ribs could already be seen under the feathers of its breast, and hunger made its hunting instincts even sharper. The bird of prey had lost its usual territory in the mountains after a fire that had scared away its smaller prey. Now it was forced to explore new territories. Flew over areas that would normally avoid the scent of humans, which would usually keep it away. But hunger was stronger than fear. At the farmhouse, the next morning began peacefully. Carlos had left early to check the north fence. In his absence, the main house was under the care of Dona Helena, his wife, who supervised the cleaning, while she waited for her daughter and grandson to visit. Juliana, remember to prepare the guest room with new sheets, Dona Helena instructed. The young maid, Fernanda, said she would be here before lunch with little Pedro. Yes, ma'am, Juliana replied. 20-year-old woman with rosy cheeks and an easy smile. I've already tidied the crib too, and set aside some toys that I found in the attic. A little after 10 o'clock, the sound of a car approaching announced the arrival of the visitors. Fernanda, Carlos and Helena's only daughter, parked her vehicle on from the back seat of the house entrance. She took out little Pedro, a chubby 8-month-old baby with rosy cheeks and big curious eyes. Mother Fernanda hugged Mrs. Helena with the baby in her arms. How good it is to be home again. My God, how he has grown, exclaimed the grandmother, taking her grandson in her arms, looking more and more like you when you were a baby. After lunch, while Fernanda helped her mother with the dishes, Juliana offered to take Pedro to sunbathe in the garden. The day is so beautiful and he would love to see the flowers, argued the young nanny with Fernanda's approval. Juliana took the baby to the wide lawn that stretched out behind the main house. Large blanket was spread over the grass and Pedro was placed in the center, surrounded by some toys in the distant paddock. Thunder was grazing without interest, when something changed the atmosphere. His ears suddenly moved, picking up sounds imperceptible to humans. The wind brought a strange odor, something wild and dangerous that did not belong there. Mustang abruptly raised his head, his nostrils dilated, inhaling deeply. His dark eyes scanned the surroundings until they fixed themselves in the direction of the main house. Something was wrong, something that awakened in their innermost selves ancestral instincts that no training or domestication could erase. With a low neigh, almost a growl, Thunder walked to the edge of the enclosure, standing erect and vigilant. His entire body had transformed. He was no longer the problematic and unruly horse, but an attentive sentinel connected to natural forces that the humans around him had long forgotten. In the garden, Pedro rolled slightly on the blanket, reaching for a colorful ball. Juliana, distracted by the flowers, did not notice the shadow that momentarily crossed the lawn. The eagle had changed position, coming even closer, preparing for the decisive attack. In the silence of that Peaceful afternoon while the sun shone over the Vista Alegre farm, and the breeze gently swayed the leaves of the trees. No one realized that a drama was about to unfold, a confrontation between predator and protector, between death instinct and salvation instinct. High in the tree, the gray eagle remained motionless, only its eyes moving, studying every detail of the scene below, its head turned in precise movements, calculating angles, distances, and speeds. The powerful talons they closed and opened rhythmically, as if rehearsing the moment to strike. The sun reflected on the feathers of its head, creating a golden glow that contrasted with the deep brown of its wings. The burning hunger drove every cell of its body, transforming the majestic bird into a hunting machine, focused on its target, the small and defenseless Pedro, who played innocently on the blanket on the grass. The baby clapped his hands, enchanted by a blue butterfly that had momentarily landed near him. A few meters away, Juliana remained absorbed in her task of picking flowers, casting distracted glances in the direction of the baby, without noticing the deadly shadow that hovered over them in the main stable. Carlos checked with Zika the preparations for the arrival of the buyers. The farmer walked between the stalls where his valuable horses rested, proud of the empire he had built. And as for the Thunder Boss, the slaughterhouse truck is coming on Friday. Carlos frowned. The master, yes. Everything is already arranged. Useless horse, at least we will make some money with him. It's a shame, the foreman muttered. He has a rare bloodline, a bloodline that is of no use. You're welcome. If the beast is impossible to tame, Carlos Cortu, let's check out the new cells that arrived. As the men walked away in the sky above the garden, the eagle finally decided it was the perfect moment. With an almost imperceptible movement, it adjusted its position, leaning slightly forward, its enormous wings partially opened, preparing for the initial thrust. In a second, the predator launched itself into the air. The movement was so fluid, so perfectly executed that it barely made a sound. Powerful wings opened completely, supporting the bird's body as it began its fatal descent. The wind caused by the movement made the leaves of the trees shake violently. Juliana only vaguely noticed the change in the breeze, attributing it to a passing gust without ever raising her eyes to the sky. What a sudden wind, she commented, holding the flowers that threatened to escape from her hands. I think I've gathered enough, Pedro. Time to go back to you. In the distant enclosure, something changed drastically in Thunder's posture. The horse raised its head in a sudden movement. Its ears moved frantically, capturing sounds that no human could perceive from such a distance. Its large black eyes scanned the horizon until they fixed in the direction of the garden of the main house. It was then that he saw the sinuous movement in the sky, the shadow that descended at increasing speed. With a loud snort of thunder, it slightly reared, its front paws rising a few centimeters from the ground before hitting the earth again. It scraped its paws on the ground, shaking more and more, while its eyes remained fixed on the distant point where the baby played, unaware of the danger that was rapidly approaching. In the garden, the sunlight reflected on the sharp claws of the predator, creating small metallic flashes that cut through the air. Pedro, lying on his back on the blanket, his eyes fixed on a cloud that vaguely resembled a rabbit. His chubby little legs flailed in the air while he chirped, completely oblivious to the approaching danger. Juliana finally stood up, the bouquet of wildflowers complete in her hands. Satisfied with her work, she turned to return to the baby when she noticed the strange change in the brightness. An unusual shadow moved quickly across the lawn, covering flowers and grass with its darkness. His brain Took only a fraction, it took her a second to process what her eyes saw, a dark and enormous shape descending from the sky, directly towards baby Pedro. The scream tore through her throat. The flowers escaped from her hands, scattering across the lawn as she tried to move, but she was too far away. Her legs were paralyzed by the momentary shock. No help. At the same moment, in the far fence, something exploded inside with thunder. All the restlessness, all the agitation that had been consuming him in the last few minutes culminated in an avalanche of primordial energy, with a deafening neigh that mixed fury and determination. The Mustang rose on its hind legs, reaching an impressive height before descending with all its force against the fence that imprisoned it. The wood, despite being robust, was no match for the violent impact. The boards broke with a crack that echoed through the farm. Fragments of wood flew in all directions without hesitation. Thunder attacked again what was left of the barrier, this time with a powerful kick. From its hind legs, the fence collapsed, completely opening the way for its escape. But it was not escape that moved the black horse as soon as it found itself free. Instead, to run to the distant hills, where their freedom would be assured. Thunder shot in the opposite direction in a furious gallop towards the main house. His hooves hit the ground with such force that small pieces of earth were thrown back into the stable. The crash of the fence breaking made Carlos and Zika interrupt their conversation. They both ran outside in time to see the impossible. Thunder, the problem horse, ran through the main pasture like a black arrow cutting through the landscape. My God, he escaped! Carlos shouted. He's going to destroy everything. Zika called the men, but Zika remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the fleeing Mustang, noticing something strange in its trajectory. Boss, he's not running away, he's going to the house. Carlos finished, the panic growing in his voice. Fernanda and the baby are there. He's going to attack them. The two men started to run but knew they would never catch up to the horse, whose speed easily surpassed any human capacity in the house. Fernanda had just gone out to the porch enjoying the fresh afternoon air. It was then that she heard Juliana's desperate scream coming from the garden, followed by a growing noise of hooves pounding the ground violently. Pedro, her son's name, escaped her lips in a terrified whisper. Before she could move toward the sound in the garden, time seemed to have slowed down. The eagle was now only meters away from Pedro, its talons open, the sharp beak slightly open in anticipation. Juliana had started to run, but the distance was too great, her movements too slow against the speed of the aerial predator. The baby finally noticed the shadow growing over him. His eyes widened, not in fear. He was too young to recognize danger, but in curiosity at that dark shape blocking the sun. His little hands reached upward as if to touch that fascinating thing descending from the sky, and it was at that exact moment that the sound of thundering hooves filled the air. Thunder had reached the garden, its arrival so sudden, so impossible that it seemed like a supernatural apparition. The black Mustang crossed the lawn, diagonally, his body a dark arrow, his eyes fixed on the exact spot where the baby and the eagle were about to meet in a final burst of his unbridled gallop. Thunder leaped his powerful body. He rose into the air with a grace that defied his mass, arching in a trajectory that placed him directly on a collision course with the eagle. Time truly stood still. At that instant, the black horse suspended in the air, the eagle with its claws outstretched, the baby with its arms raised. The collision was violent and precise. In the last instant of the jump, Thunder twisted, his body in the air, positioning himself directly between the eagle and the defenseless baby. The predator's lethal claws, which were inches away from grabbing Pedro, met only air when the black Mustang appeared like a living barrier between hunter and prey. One of the sharp claws scraped the baby's scalp, cutting a few golden strands of his hair but without hurting his skin. The wind caused by the sudden movement made Pedro blink and, finally, startled by the commotion, the little one began to cry. The eagle, surprised by the unexpected intervention, flapped its wings frantically to regain its balance. It rose a few meters. Its brown and golden feathers reflected the sunlight as it planed in the air. Its amber eyes were now fixed on the new element that had interrupted its hunt. Thunder. It landed with pinpoint precision next to the blanket where Pedro was crying. Its hooves narrowly avoided touching the baby, demonstrating surprising control. For an animal considered untamable, the horse immediately spun around, putting itself in a defensive position. Its body formed a protective barrier over the child, its ears completely erect and its eyes fixed on the predator circling above. Thunder let out a deafening neigh that echoed throughout the entire farm. It wasn't a sound of fear, but a challenge. Declaration of war that transcended species barriers. In a movement of pure defensive aggression, the Mustang rose up on its hind legs, reaching almost 2 m in height. Front legs struck the air violently, creating a protective arc over the baby. The display of strength was enough to make the eagle temporarily retreat, flapping its powerful wings to keep its distance from the new obstacle. "My God," Zika murmured, paralyzed by the unbelievable scene. "He's protecting the boy." Carlos couldn't articulate a single word. His face had lost all color, his eyes wide open, fixed on the scene that defied all logic. The horse he considered a danger, a problematic animal destined for slaughter, was deliberately placing itself between a deadly predator and his own grandson. Fernanda, still on the porch, finally managed to break her paralysis and began to run toward the garden. Pedro's scream tore through her throat as she stumbled along the path, desperate to reach her son. Only 20 meters away, the eagle had recovered from its initial fright. Circling in the air, it analyzed the situation with the cold intelligence of an ancient predator. The hunger that consumed it was too powerful to ignore, and the human cub still represented the most vulnerable prey in sight. The new obstacle, the large black mammal, was just that, an obstacle to be overcome with a new strategy. The bird of prey began to describe smaller circles, gradually gaining height. Its eyes never left the baby, calculating angles and speeds for a new attack. This time, considering the presence of the horse in the equation, Thunder returned to all fours, but its posture remained completely alert. Its entire body radiated tension. The muscles visible under the black coat were ready to explode into movement. Again, its nostrils flared. They sniffed the air, capturing the predator's scent, while their ears moved, constantly alert for any change in the eagle's flight pattern. Carlos whispered, finally finding his voice. "Zika, let's approach slowly. I don't want to scare either of them." The foreman nodded, understanding that the two His boss was referring to were both the eagle and the horse. Any sudden movement could trigger an unpredictable reaction from both animals, putting the baby in even more danger. The eagle, noticing the arrival of more elements on the scene, let out a shrill cry and dove again, this time aiming for a gap between the horse and the approaching humans. The speed of the attack was astonishing. The wings were partially closed to maximize momentum. Thunder neighed loudly. It rose again on its hind legs. The black Mustang, so long restrained and rejected, released all its ancestral strength in an open challenge to the predator that threatened the small human under its protection. The setting sun transformed its silhouette into an almost mythological figure outlined against the reddish sky, an unlikely guardian, born of instincts that defied rational understanding. His mane fluttered in the wind like a war flag. His eyes reflected the absolute determination of a protector willing to do anything. The eagle, now driven by both hunger and frustration, changed its strategy, abandoning the attempt to reach the baby it recognized in the horse, the true obstacle to be eliminated. With a precise movement, the predator dove straight at Thunder, his sharp claws aimed at the vulnerable neck of the Mustang where the main veins pulsed beneath the black fur. The attack was so fast it seemed like a golden blur cutting through the air. The eagle emitted a shrill cry as it launched itself with all its strength at its new target. Its claws, capable of piercing hide and muscle with ease, gleamed under the setting sun. Thunder, but it was no ordinary prey. Millennia of evolution as an escape animal had endowed horses with extraordinary reflexes, and the wild blood that ran through the Mustang's veins only intensified these abilities in a movement that combined power and precision. The horse reared violently, rising up on its hind legs. Its front legs struck the air in an arc defensively, grazing one of the eagle's wings. The impact, even though it wasn't direct, was enough to unbalance the predator, which let out a squawk of pain and surprise. Some golden feathers came loose and floated in the air as the bird quickly moved away. "That's Thunder," Zika shouted, unconsciously cheering for the horse that everyone considered dangerous. "Keep her away, boy." Juliana, finally recovering from the initial shock, gathered all her courage and took advantage of the moment when the eagle moved away. The young nanny ran towards the baby, determined to rescue him. Her hurried steps, however, were betrayed by the uneven ground of the garden. As she passed one of the flower beds, her foot slipped on the damp earth. Juliana completely lost her balance, falling violently with a frightened scream. "My ankle," she moaned, grabbing her leg with trembling hands. "I can't get up. Someone help Pedro, please." Carlos, who had managed to restrain Fernanda momentarily to prevent her from putting herself in danger, now made a decision. With a quick movement, he passed his daughter to Zika. "Hold her," he ordered firmly. "I'll get her." The boy. "Father, beware of the thunder," Fernanda begged, her face pale with terror. "Can he attack you, too?" Carlos didn't respond. In his 40 years of running the farm, he had never faced a situation even remotely like that. The man, who had always planned every aspect of his business with precision, now launched himself toward the unknown, guided only by the need to protect his family. In a treacherous attack, the eagle gained altitude and dove again. The predator's sharp claws sank into the flesh of Thunder, penetrating deep into the muscular neck. A neigh of pure pain escaped the horse's throat, a sound so sharp and agonizing that it made everyone present shudder. "No!" Carlos shouted, seeing the dark blood beginning to run down the animal's black fur. Despite the unbearable pain, Thunder did not retreat. Despite being injured, he interposed himself as a protective barrier between the predator and the calf. In a heroic effort, he managed to propel his body against the trunk of a nearby tree, momentarily freeing himself from the eagle. The bird, temporarily unbalanced, took flight again. Blood was still gushing from the wounds on Thunder's neck, but his wild eyes never left the threat circling above. The eagle began its final dive. Golden body cut through the air like a projectile, its claws extended like lethal daggers. Pedro lay defenseless, while Carlos ran desperately, knowing that he would not arrive in time. Thunder, however, was still there. The black Mustang, even seriously injured, found, somewhere deep within his being, a last reserve of strength. With millimeter precision, he calculated the eagle's trajectory. At the exact moment it reached the critical point of its dive, Thunder exploded into motion. The horse launched itself forward in a powerful leap that seemed impossible for such an injured animal. Front paws extended in front of him, hit the eagle square in the center of its body. The impact was deafening. The predator, thrown to the side, fell heavily several meters away. Thunder remained standing, shaking, visibly, his body positioned as a final barrier between the baby and the fallen predator. Carlos, taking advantage of the decisive moment, picked up Pedro in his arms, pressing him against his chest with a sob of relief. Fernanda ran towards him, taking her son in her arms with tears streaming freely down her face. The eagle, recognizing its defeat, flapped its wings with difficulty, rising slowly and disappearing in the direction of the mountains. Carlos turned towards the Mustang. Thunder was still standing, but only by sheer force of will. The farmer cautiously approached the injured animal with his heart racing. He reached out his hand and for the first time touched its fur. "Thank you," he whispered, words he had never imagined addressing to an animal. "You are extraordinary." Thunder moved his head slightly, inclining it towards the farmer's touch, a mutual recognition between two beings who had gone from antagonism to understanding through most unlikely of circumstances. In the days that followed, a remarkable transformation occurred at the Vista Alegre farm. Thunder, previously destined for slaughter, became the center of attention. His wounds healed, leaving visible marks on his neck, medals of honor for his extraordinary courage. The news of the horse that faced an eagle to save a baby spread quickly throughout the region. The isolated stable where he lived was replaced by a pen near the main house, where Pedro, now fascinated by the big black horse, watched him daily. Thunder is not for sale became Carlos' automatic response to the countless offers. He is not just a horse, he is a member of the family. And on summer nights, when everyone gathered on the porch, Thunder would approach the fence, his black silhouette watchful against the starry sky. In those moments, the family remembered the truth they had discovered in the most dramatic way possible, that true nobility does not come from pedigrees or appearances, but from courageous choices made in the most critical moments of life. Yeah.